Hello and welcome to the Walk Around podcast powered by JM&A Group. If you are in the automotive world, this is the podcast for you. I am your host, one of your hosts, Mark Spoto, joined as always by Elliot Shore.
Heyo.
And today we have with us Diana Lee. Diana is a dynamic CEO and automotive veteran in the industry. She has a company called Constellation, which is a SaaS enterprise and digital marketing firm that provides technology to help you engage and send direct messages to your customers with efficiency and importance. Diana was just an amazing guest. There's really no other way to say that.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Diana brought the passion. She brought the heat. So buckle up, everyone, and get ready. This is going to be a roller coaster.
Absolutely. Enjoy this conversation because you are definitely going to learn a lot. Let's take a walk around. We did. Let's take a walk around with Diana Lee. Well, Diana Lee, thank you so much for joining us on the walk around. We really appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, so we're excited. You know, it's not often that we have an expert when it comes to digital marketing. So I think our audience is going to get a lot out of this, but not only because of the business that you're in, the background that you have and your experience.
Yeah, an awesome story. You know, we were marveling in preparation at your ascent from business manager to CEO and of a really a technology company as much as it is a advertising company, which is something we definitely want to get into. And it's funny, AI is all the rage these days. You can't go anywhere without hearing about AI technologies. Yeah. And so we're excited for this conversation. But first, I think for us, tell us about how you got in your love of automotive. And, you started as a business manager in dealerships, and worked your way up to where you are today. But, we're always curious, especially, and we've been highlighting women in automotive leadership specifically because it's very underrepresented in our industry. And so we're always super curious about how, what developed your love for automotive?
Yeah, it starts back in 1974. My family immigrated here from South Korea. And, South Korea back then had gone through war and it was a very, very poor country. So I remember my dad fought in the Vietnam War with the Americans and came back when I was 5. And he said, we're going to the land of the Wonderland, and it's going to be the U.S., right? And so I remember we boarded the plane, we landed in the slums of Philadelphia, and my parents worked 15-hour days. My father, my mother, one was a nurse, the other one was an electrician, and they opened a little store and they ran it in the slums of Philadelphia. And so coming from an immigrant family that was poor, and watching my parents go through all these struggles, like my dad was, there was times that they were held up at gunpoint, my mom and my father. They would come back and my dad would say, I told you can't run when they have the gun up. And my mom's like, I don't care. I'm still going to run out the door. Like, these are like the conversations that I remember, right?
Oh my God. So that must have been scary for you to come from, your home country and said, hey, guess what, Diana, we're packing up and we're going to a new place.
I think I was terrified because I don't remember speaking English back then, right? Wow. And so I used to watch Brady Bunch every day to learn how to speak English. And but when you come from this kind of environment, you don't want to ask your parents for anything because you realize they're so overburdened.
Very interesting.
Trying to make sure their survival for the family.
God, I wish my son was listening.
Right, seriously.
I need to have him listen to that exact quote. Both of my boys.
Well, my son too. You can throw him into that.
So at 18, when I went to college, I wanted to find a job that would support my education, right? Because I realized my parents were paying for college at that point. So back then it was newspapers. It was 1989. I opened up the newspaper and I saw an ad for a greeter at a local car dealership.
Wow.
And I applied for the position. I got the position as the greeter. And then this is typical of the car business. Even now, after 2 weeks, they're like, oh yeah, you're no longer a greeter. There's ups on the showroom floor. You have to go. Now you're a salesperson.
Right.
So
Ready or not.
So Diana, what did your parents think when you told them, I'm going to get a job at a car dealership?
They said, are you out of your mind? You said you were going to be an attorney.
Right.
What do you mean you're working at a car dealership? And I was like, they pay really well. I make these commissions. They gave me a Toyota Celica to drive,
Right.
red hot Toyota Celica.
Nice.
And that was my entryway into the car business. I needed the money, and overall the car business, fantastic, rewarding people with talent.
Right.
So that's how I entered in. My parents said, well, are you going to give this up when I graduated? And I said, no. And they said, why? And I said, because finance managers make over $100K a year, and I could make that at 21.
Right.
So I'm staying in it. That's it. And
Wow.
so that was my entrance way into
Well,
the
if
car
nothing
business.
else, the car business is a meritocracy. Right?
Yes,
I mean,
it certainly is.
It certainly is.
Yeah, I could tell you many dealers who it's one of the one places, to your point, in the whole world where your education, your background, it really does not matter. It's a matter of production.
So would you say that's kind of where you started to groom your own entrepreneurial spirit, and kind of did that spark get set off? Did you think back then, I'm going to be owning my own business?
No, but the car business is street fighting. That's how I describe it.
Right.
You're in a street fight. It's not like an educated fight. You got to figure out how to beat the opponent each and every time.
Yep.
So the dealership that I worked for, it was really hard. It was a Toyota / they had almost every franchise, but I was on the Toyota side. And we weren't allowed to come back into the dealership unless you basically brought the up inside of the dealership. So whether it was rain, snow, sleet, you're outside with the umbrella and you've got to get to the customer before anybody else gets there so you could actually go inside to warm up.
Oh my
So
gosh, that's wild.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
I mean, we've heard stories of people fist fighting for ups in the back room. That's the first time I've heard of forcing everyone outside and not letting them in.
Yeah, and it was like, I'll go back. Back then there was a lot of drugs in the industry, and I stayed away from it because I saw lives get ruined.
Sure.
And being 18, 19, seeing it. We had Don, the pimp that worked there, and he was a salesperson. Like, I can go on and on about the
We need to get him on the
craziest
podcast.
stories in the car business. And I witnessed it all because of the fact that I was in a very successful dealership, and there was a lot of competition.
Right.
And it was street fighting. It was street fighting with those guys. And they, they tied a bird against my car one time. It was a dead bird. And I would drive and the bird would go fly.
Oh my.
And I would hit the window. But it was like competitive. We were just like always competing
Right.
to be
So it's amazing you came back every day.
Well, and stayed in the business.
And stayed in the business.
I fought harder than anybody else because I was
Love it.
female. I was Asian. They thought I was going to be submissive. So there's a story. There was one time when I was in finance, I was 22 years old, and one of the salespeople came to me on my first day of work at a car dealership in New York City. He throws the file at me and he says, "Girl, build this out." I grab the file. I chase after him in the middle of the showroom. It's my first day at work, and I'm the finance manager. He's a salesperson. He's supposed to report into me. Doesn't care. I start ripping it up, and I said, "You made a mistake. You may have to start all over again." I flipped it up in the air, and I turned around. I walked into the office. And I had to do that because I wanted to show that I was the alpha.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like it's like being in a prison and you got to make sure you're the toughest,
right.
And grabbiest, that you're short. I'm 5'3", I'm Asian. Everybody's going to basically try to harass me. So I had to be the monster in the room. So that's where all this came out.
Well, what a great customer experience.
Yeah. But that's pretty amazing that you had that fortitude.
Absolutely.
At that age to really you're fighting off two things, a double minority in a sense in the car business. And is that something, I'm sure and we know you get involved in charities today and mentor and women, and is that something you would continue to recommend, that strategy, or how have you evolved from that point to now as a leader of many people of all different types of people?
Yeah, Elliot, I think this has been a tough thing for me. Like, I don't know what a lot of other leaders would say is that when you come from that environment, it's hard for you to be not as passionate about winning.
Sure.
And that's really entrepreneurism. It's all about being so paranoid that you have to win every time. And that was car business teaching me all of that. But throughout the journey, I could not have gotten to where I am without the advocates from men. Like there is no way I could have gotten here if men didn't help me out. And I have to tell you, and I can tell you crazy stories where I went up to like the CEO of Reynolds in NADA, right? And I'm like, when I found out who he is, I went up to him and I'm like, do you know Constellation? He's like, no. And I said, let me tell you about Constellation. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And you need to take a meeting with me. Yeah. And you can't go inside the store unless you take a meeting with me. And he's laughing. He takes the meeting. And in the meeting, I tell everybody in the room what I did at NADA to him. And he says, Dana, that was an assault. And I go, well, I'm only 5'3" and an Asian woman. So that's why I know you didn't call security. But if I was a dude, you would probably call security on me.
Right.
And that's true. It's true. But by having somebody like Chris,
sure,
that basically believed in having the conversation with me,
yeah,
I wouldn't be here today, right? It's
right,
all the advocates and all the men and females that helped us along the way to grow the company. It was all advocacy.
So it's important, I think what you're saying is to find someone who can be a champion for you. And build that relationship.
Yeah, we talk about cheerleaders, having cheerleaders for you. You need cheerleaders. No one can do this alone.
Right.
No one can build their career. But there is something else that I heard in there that, I think is maybe some, first of all, the confidence that you have, the fearlessness that you showed to be able to, rip up those pieces of paper, that deal to approach the CEO of a powerful company and say, you need to meet with me. That confidence and the tenacity. I mean, really, and because no one's going to, this is something that we say, but no one's going to manage your career for you. And you have to be an active participant in your career management.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't hear no. And the reason I always say is like our sales team said, he said no to me. And I was like, no, that's not what you heard. That organization's very big, right? One person saying no doesn't mean anything. There's 200 other people that you can go and get the yes. So I say in every house, there's a front door, a back door, windows, there's a chimney. There's many ways in, just like in the company. And you just have to find the one yes. So you just keep asking. And that's always been my motto.
Wow.
Just don't stop. Just keep asking.
I love it. Amazing. So how did you make the leap from the dealership? Because to your point, like it's almost like a drug working. And I've heard that it's a drug in and of itself, the sales, that environment, the competition. So how did you make that leap? And a lot of people get stuck in it, right? And they never leave the dealership. So how did you make that leap from retail associate to CEO of a major advertising company?
Yeah. So what happened was I was 47 and my husband said, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, you say you're always the best. You say you could do it better than all these companies. You say that you're the fastest, the strongest, and all of that. And I don't believe you because you don't actually do it.
Wow.
So I said, fine, I want to do it. And I jumped.
Wow.
Some tough love there.
Yeah.
Pushed
Little
you
coaching.
in.
Yeah. And it was fear-based. I think a lot of decisions of us not deciding to do something for our careers has a lot to do with the fact that you think you're going to fail before you can start. And 6.5 years later now, we're 65 fastest growing company in the US. We're number 10 fastest woman-led company in the US. We won EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2021.
Awesome.
We're hitting 60 million in gross revenues this year alone. I could never have imagined doing that if I didn't take the leap.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
What a great story. I mean, you're right. Fear is a powerful demotivator. Right.
So, Diana, what would you say to some people who are maybe listening and they're considering making that leap for themselves? What advice, looking back now, 6 years later, what would you say to that person?
I would say the only person that's holding you back is yourself. And the reason that you're holding yourself is because you're 3 steps away of thinking about everything that can go wrong and not thinking about everything that can go right. And if you have the tenacity and the hard work and the determination, and most of the people in the car business that say in retail automotive, they do, because they wouldn't have survived retail automotive. It's a street fight and a grind. And if you've been doing it for that long, you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it's one of the reasons that I feel very passionately about that the dealer model will survive is because the dealers and the general managers and the people that work in dealerships are some of the most business savvy humans on earth. Yeah. I firmly believe that. And they will adjust. They may hang on to the last minute to what they want, but they will, when the moment they need to, they will pivot because I believe they are that, they're survivors.
Resilience.
Yeah. And they're resilient. Would you say that's fair in your experience as well?
Absolutely. Look how complicated the auto business is, right? You've got aging inventory. You've got new car chip shortages. You have cars not being able to come in. You've got in-transit vehicles. You got websites. You got direct-to-consumer sales. You got wholesalers. You got finance departments. You have 5 business units within a dealership. Exactly. You got parts, you got service, you got sales, you got new cars, you got CPO, you got used. It is the most complex business on earth, right?
For sure.
And you understand it, you run it, and you're always maintaining all the different levels to make sure that it becomes a profitable situation for a dealer. You have what it takes already. By the time you're GSM, GM, or even in finance, you have what it takes.
Yeah,
I believe.
Definitely.
I love that.
So let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
That was great. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's focus a little bit on dealer advertising. And let's get into the sweet spot here. But so obviously over the last few years, the industry's been tipped on its head in terms of specifically with regards to inventory. And, the game before COVID was a lot about leads, getting leads in digital advertising, right? And now with no inventory, what are you guys, how are you advising your customers, your clients in terms of, where they should be focusing if they don't have inventory in terms of their advertising? Yep.
A lot of things that are happening now in the last 3 years, and I've been in the car business now for over 34 years, right? I have seen things in the last 3 years I've never seen in the history of auto. Mm-hmm. Like we all think we know auto, and then the last 3 years, it's like, okay, turned it totally around. The biggest area that I feel like there's a largest amount of opportunity has to do with leasing. And it's because almost 80% of consumer markets have purchased their leases in the last 2 years. That's remarkable a number, right?
Yeah.
But I've talked to JP Morgan and I've talked to all of these financial institutions, and they have said to me, over 80% have purchased their cars out. So that in itself defeats all loyalty from an OEM perspective and a dealer perspective. You no longer have the customer coming back to you unless they have to service the vehicle right now. That's huge.
Huge.
So the number one opportunity for dealers right now is maintaining that damn CRM and DMS system that they currently have and utilizing their first party data to get those customers back in to create loyalty. That is number one, top of mind. If you don't work that CRM and DMS, they are not loyal to you because they don't have to be anymore. They can go to any brand. They have defected. And if you don't do something now to get those customers back to your dealership, they never have to come back to you again.
So that's fantastic advice. So Diana, you're sitting with a dealer owner right now or their team. What are you telling them to do to get those customers back in?
So it's a little different from state to state. So you got New York and you got California, which had the highest penetration of leases.
Right.
But if you look at the manufacturer data right now and you say, what are the most amount of cars being sold? They're no longer in those types of states. It's like states like Florida and Texas that are winning because those were retail states. Those states had less leasing and more retail and cash, right?
Interesting.
But what's happened right now, and this is also astounding. I asked the banks, I'm like, how are they buying these cars? They go cash. I'm like, what? They're not financing? No, they bought their cars back in cash, Diana.
Right.
And so you have to think credit unions or who gave them the cash, but they've defected. In certain states where there's lease penetrations at a very, very high level, those are the ones that are mostly in jeopardy to lose brand loyalty and dealer loyalty. So what I'm saying to them is the golden keys right now is not even conquest, it's retention. You've got to get them back in, whether it be for servicing, whether it be that you got to give them a special offer right now where you say, hey, I will buy your car back and give you a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 incentive to come back and make that purchase with me.
Sure.
You've got to come up with some messaging that resonates back to the consumer markets that have defected from your dealership.
Yeah, that's it's tremendous advice. And really, that's great advice in any time to retain your customers. It's always acquisition cost of a conquest customer is always going to be more than retaining the customers you have. But I'm curious, what type of, obviously linking it back to your company in terms of the technology and how people are using technology to really drive these messages home. How are you seeing, how are you guys leveraging technology on behalf of your customers to drive these messages and these consumers back to the dealership?
Yeah, Elliot, I think there's a lot of great things that you can do right now. And this has nothing to do with even using Constellation. But if you don't have a strategic partner that can have the technology to do this, you need to leave and find one that does. So the first thing I would say is, like I had said, the most important pieces is protecting the customers in your DMS and CRM system and creating loyalty with them, because that's the easiest win. That's that lowest hanging fruit. They purchased something from you already and it's trying to get them back. So in order to do that, you have to utilize the technologies that you have already in-house. So they're using some sort of mailer/email marketing system between sales, service, and parts.
Right.
It could be automotive masterminds. It could be Dominion.
Sure.
It could be auto alert. You've got to download that information, the first party data that you have, and then import it into digital media. So basically going into Meta, going to Performance Max, and using that so those people get targeted, right? And so we basically can put a technology widget in between that automatically transfers your first party data from your DMS and your Dominion products like that into doing social media and digital marketing. That's one piece. You need those pieces to go together.
So for our So sorry,
Yeah.
then for our less savvy, so what you're saying is you essentially take your customers, maybe their email address, you flip them over to Meta, to Facebook, to Instagram. When that email address logs on, you now know my customer is on Facebook, and it hits them with a message that's relevant to them. Am I explaining that right?
It's close. So what it's basically doing is, and not everybody has a social media page, but it's going to basically match about 70%. So all it needs is a name, phone number, email address, and it could match it to a social media profile. So when I go on Instagram as Diana Lee and I'm going through my feed, all of a sudden I will get an ad directly to me and say, hey, Diana, it's time for you to bring your car back now, and I'll give you $3,000 for the car that you just purchased on top of whatever the value that you purchased your vehicle for outright.
Gotcha.
Right. And so now it targets me, and it gives me a targeted message to me based on the information the CRM and DMS already has and what Automotive Masterminds already has.
And
the second part.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
The second part is products like Auto Mastermind is really slick, but people are not utilizing it the way it should be utilized, meaning all the personalization of Automotive Mastermind that allows you to market customers one-to-one, because every piece of materials should say, you have a 2022 BMW X5 with this VIN number, and right now you can get into a payment of $529, which matches the payment of $529 that you had 3 years ago. That's what Mastermind is phenomenal at doing, right? And companies like that.
Sure.
We can basically take that data, import it all, and make a data stream. And each customer will get their personalized email.
Wow.
For any email provider that they're using, MailChimp, Orbi, whatever you're using, I can transfer that to them. And now you can email personalized emails for each customer that automatically goes out to them every single month to give them an offer to come back to your store based on their personal information. That's what they need to do.
So Diana, let's geek out a little bit on the marketing side.
You are the marketing.
I am the marketing guy
in the room.
So let's talk channel management for a second. You mentioned social, you mentioned email. What do you think is the right mix? Do you favor one versus the other? Do you think a dealer needs to have kind of this effort that touches all across various channels? What are your thoughts on just the mix?
Yeah, so it should be overall omni-channel. But this is the problem with the auto business. And this is something that we at Constellation is driven and mission to fixing. The problem right now is the one thing that every dealer waits for is creative. Mm-hmm. If you really look at it, it's creative. So if you look and you have your best search provider, your best display provider, your best website provider, they're not linked together. They're all separate companies.
Right.
So from a dealer perspective, what drives me nuts is basically the general manager, GSM, says, these are my price leaders. These vehicles are my price leaders. These are the ones that I'm going to give special pricing to. Now you've got to send that to 20 vendors that don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. And each one is actually making different pieces of creative for you. My email vendor is going to make a different piece of creative versus my website vendor that's going to make a different piece of creative, which my display vendor and my social media vendor, everybody basically makes their own piece of creative. This is what's broken. The problem here then is every artist that makes it manually basically does it a slightly differently on the branding, and you lose brand consistency all the way throughout.
Right.
And that's a major problem in the auto industry. And that's what we fix. We make all the iterations of creative through a machine that dynamically generates it. And then I can pass it to email. I can pass it to their social provider, their website provider. It goes automatically to those providers. and then fixes the problem of the creative all the way through.
Wow, that's interesting.
She's speaking my language.
Yeah, I mean, consistency
in brand. It's so important.
It is the most important thing. It's more. Would you say that it's more important than the message itself? Is that it's consistent?
It's consistent. And that's what Lithia does so well. So Lithia has been using us for the last 3.5 years. They call it Lad Tech. It's Constellation. They have every website up within 3 days of getting an offer. You know how incredible that is? The rest of the industry, its average days is 14 days to market because of offer details. 14 days.
Wow.
Because everybody's manually making the creative. That's what's broken.
When we're going to have a sure thing coming up here in a minute, and we do have a question.
That's a teaser.
Yeah, for sure. That is a teaser.
Very nice.
Yeah. No, but that's amazing. And is the efficiency generated in the technology? Is that the secret sauce there? Is leveraging different technology to be able to generate creative so quickly? Is that
Yes. So Constellation is a modular creative content maker. That's what we do. We make content, but we make it for all of the different channels and deploy immediately. And so the thing is, with AI and with machine learning and with automation, you don't have to give it to an artist anymore.
Right,
and this is really important. Every artist I ever hired, they said, I didn't go to Pratt and Parsons and the best art schools of the world to make banner ads all day. I'm not doing it. I quit. Those words all the time. And I was like, that's it. I have to automate a creative process because I can't have more people quitting saying, I didn't go to the best art schools of the world in order to do banner ads. And that's what we're forcing them to do. Millions of banner ads. Think about it. There's 17,500 US franchises here in America. There's $50,000 a month on average advertising that each dealer is doing per month at a tier 3 level. Imagine the amount of creative assets that you have to make for $50,000 a month on an average for each dealer times 17,500. That starts all over again that next month.
Right. And trying to meet those deadlines and trying to just get it up on time. It would drive me nuts when I was a district manager and we'd be a week into a sales event month. And I'd look at my dealers' websites and they still the old stuff. It was still the old stuff a week later. Yeah. 100%. All right.
So Diana, just real quick before we get to sure thing, what other trends are you seeing out there from your vantage point? Share with our audience just kind of your quick take on the state of the industry.
So they're not going to like what I have to say, but I want to say because it's the truth.
That's why it's so great to ask you this question.
And they're going to hate it, but I'm going to tell them. Tier 1 and Tier 3 are merging, whether they like it or not. There is going to be direct-to-consumer sales, and the franchises are going to be delivery centers in the future for many of the automakers in order for them to survive.
Wow.
And I just feel like instead of fighting it, we have to work together with the automakers to make it the best experience for the customers, or else we will lose our industry to direct-to-consumer electric makers that are coming in without setting up franchise models. And I beg of you, don't do this, because we all work too damn hard in retail automotive to let the Carvanas of the world take over our industries. The Brooms, they're Carvanas. The electric car makers that go direct to consumers, they've done it already. And if we don't work together with our auto manufacturers to come up with a streamlined system for our consumers, there will be no market. And what I mean by that, there is no consumer that wants to search 14 different separate websites to see whether you have the car or not. Think about it from the perspective of the consumer. Nobody wants to do that. So please, let's come up with a system where we can show the customer the best choices of inventory and not worry about, I'm not going to give him my car. That's my car. No, you're going to lose the industry. Think of what we're saying and doing here.
Well, Diana, this is something.
I'm ready to go.
We're ready.
I'm ready.
This is something we've talked about on the podcast
100%.
before in terms of the lessons to be taken away from Carvana.
Definitely.
Clearly, they have tapped into what the consumer prefers.
They have filled a need, a gap in the consumer experience that, quite frankly, a lot of dealers are not fulfilling. And that's what entrepreneurism is all about, is filling gaps that other companies are not filling today. And so I love your impassioned plea to the industry. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. Where do we start?
All right. So on that note, let's go right into a sure thing, because Diana, I feel like you're going to have some really good commentary.
I will tell you.
I'm sweating, aren't you?
I'm a little nervous.
You're a little nervous.
Had I known that we would get very opinionated,
very passionate,
I would have brought even more opinions than I normally bring.
Diana, most people take it easy on Elliot when he gives his hot takes. So please, I don't feel like I need to tell you to unleash.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Elliot's
What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm a little Asian woman. What can they actually say to me? Right?
That's what you said to the Reynolds guy.
Right,
now he's doing business.
Right. And the poor salesperson. But
okay.
No, we're all good. Okay.
So here we go. Sure thing. He's going to give you some hot takes, and you tell him yes or no.
Okay, Diana.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
We did touch this a little bit, but I have observed dealers really do struggle with where to put the dollars in their advertising budgets. You mentioned that $50,000, and that's a real number. There's a lot of advertising you can buy with $50,000, and a lot of the dealers I know really fall in love with TV, local news, always a clear point. Live sports, right? And but in my experience, I believe that the first dollar a dealer should spend on their advertising is in search engines, because the customer is showing intent to purchase. And so the first dollar you should spend is on search engines, Google, Yahoo, as your first dollar of media spend. Sure thing or not a sure thing?
It's a sure thing, but I would add one more element to it.
Okay.
You know what it is? Yeah. It's a sure thing. You should definitely launch it in digital, and search is a great way to do it. But marry it to your first party data and it'll work even better.
Love that. So basically, like we were saying, leverage that data, that first party data you have, put it into the search engine, work with the partners like Google and the other search engines. And then that way, when your customer is actually, or customers that look like your customer are actually searching. Is that right?
Yes. If you use it on digital media, import your first party data first to attract those customers first. That's your lowest hanging fruit, and get them back to your store.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. That's a one
start.
For one.
That is a one.
Mark takes delight when I'm off. So
he usually swings and misses at the beginning. So this is a good start.
I do have a follow-up question. In thinking about technology, one of the things that I've seen dealers struggle with, specifically with search engine marketing, is the copyright messaging. Is that something that you're able or working on in terms of automating and using AI and technology to actually generate all that copy, as opposed to humans thinking about, this search term, let me use this phrase under that? Is that something that can be automated?
It can be automated. So what's going on with AI right now is it's too wild. So people don't realize anything, even images, you'll see like 3 heads instead of 1 head every once in a while, right? A lot of it's right and a lot of it is wrong. So in highly regulated industries, what I always say is use AI for the pieces that don't matter as much. Background, right? Or but the words that need to go through regulatory and compliance approvals, those basically you could lock down and then use filler words that you actually don't need to go through regulation on. And that is the perfect world, is to actually blend the areas that you can go broad and not have to have regulators look at, and the ones that really you need regulators to look at and lawyers to look at, don't rely on AI.
Great advice.
Right.
Great advice. Because there are still advertising covenants and regulations out there that AI may not be aware of.
Right. Certainly.
So, all right, that's great advice. All right, so speaking of AI, the rise of ChatGPT in our society has been enormous. It's there is no shortage of things being used or tested using companies like ChatGPT and others as well. There's a lot of funny ways to use it. I've seen people ask ChatGPT for weight loss plans. I've seen them asked to write poetry. But I believe that the best use of ChatGPT is for helping me to make excuses as to why I need to go golfing this weekend with my buddies. Sure thing or not a sure thing?
I think that your wife may not like ChatGPT. Continue to use it in that way.
But what are some of the ways you are seeing ChatGPT utilized in your world?
I think one of the ways that it can be utilized that would work for everybody is the fact that sometimes what I like to do is ask what something means back to me. Yeah. Meaning, I understand the meaning of it, a word, right? But what would it mean for anybody else? So in other
words, I like to play golf. How can I help my wife understand how much I like to play golf?
Or why it's important to play golf.
Yes, there you go.
Exactly. So I know the meaning, but how can I translate that meaning and what would it mean to others? Because I'm always trying to get a 3D perspective because you're in your own self.
No doubt.
And you know exactly how you feel about it, but how could other people interpret the interpretation of that word? It's sometimes very different. So it allows you to not be a narcissist and kind of look at it from everybody else's perspective, which is helpful in the car business too.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Well, that's a miss. That's a miss. Okay. All right. Well, we're talking about AI. And, over the course of the world here, there has really been no shortage of movies that have forecasted the doom of mankind and the rise of machines. There's a lot of movies out there that talk about this. Terminator, iRobot. WALL-E comes to mind. Transformers, which is definitely a machine takeover movie. Ex Machina, I know that's a favorite among many people. But I believe that the number one AI movie of all time, without a doubt, has to be The Matrix. Sure thing or not a sure thing?
It's absolutely the sure thing.
Yes, you did it.
That's 100% right, Elliot.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You did so well.
Too well. These were too easy.
These were too easy.
We thought they would be better, but no, they were good. This was Diana. Thank you so much for sharing your story. What an inspirational story in terms of growing up in the slums, of Philadelphia, and making your way to the car business, and then making your way over to to running your own company and making that leap. Congratulations on all your success. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Well, I love you guys because you're from the auto industry, and I love the dealer community. It's in my heart because that's where I came from. So if this helps to inspire anybody to jump and try, then that's what I'm here to do. So thank you so much for allowing me to share my story today.
Thanks, Diana. Take care. Thank you so much for listening. Whether you are a dealer owner, GM, sales or service, or just starting your automotive career, you are sure to pick up some insights.
Oh, that's very slick. I like what you did there.
Appreciate it.
Well, in all seriousness, thank you for listening. We would really love if you could go on and leave us a review. Go ahead and hit subscribe. We're on YouTube for the video, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. We greatly appreciate you listening. Thank you, guys.